To anyone that may be involved, do the right thing. This is an 84-year-old grandma. You still have the time to do the right thing before this becomes a much worse scenario for you.
Somebody is out there who knows this offender, who lives with, works with, plays with, hangs out with, lives next to, has some interactions with this guy. And hopefully those people will call into law enforcement, and hopefully it will bring this case to a close relatively soon.
She fought back. Not metaphorically. Not in the way people say someone fought back when they mean they stayed strong or they kept hoping. At her own front door in the middle of the night, with a masked stranger and a visible weapon, Nancy Guthrie made a physical decision. She refused to leave. And the blood that her family found on that porch the following morning is the documented, forensically readable proof of exactly what that decision cost her. For 3 months, that blood has been mentioned in passing, a detail, confirmation that something violent happened. But nobody with the right credentials had sat down and actually read it, until this week. Jim Clemente spent his FBI career inside the Behavioral Analysis Unit, the division responsible for profiling the most violent and complex criminal cases in the country. He has worked thousands of abductions, kidnappings, and violent crimes. He teaches law enforcement agencies across the United States and internationally. When he looks at crime scene evidence, he is not guessing. He is reading a language he has spent decades learning to translate. This week, he read the blood on Nancy Guthrie's porch. And what he found is the most specific, most credentialed, and most emotionally significant forensic analysis this investigation has produced since the doorbell camera footage was released in February. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She is the mother of Today Show co-host Savannah Guthrie. A family photograph taken months before her disappearance shows her smiling, surrounded by the people she loved most. The kind of woman whose presence holds a room together without ever demanding attention. On the evening of January 31st, 2026, she had dinner with family at her daughter Annie's home in Tucson, Arizona. Her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, drove her back to her house in the Catalina foothills. She stepped inside. The door closed. She has not been seen since. In the early hours of February 1st, the doorbell camera at Nancy's front door captured something before going offline at 1:47 in the morning. A masked male figure in dark clothing, carrying a backpack with reflective straps, a handgun visible in a holster, a flashlight held in his mouth. He reaches toward the lens. The footage cuts. 41 minutes later, at 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker monitoring application loses its connection to her phone. In those 41 minutes, something happened in that house and on that porch that left physical evidence behind. Evidence the forensic team photographed, bagged, and documented on the morning of February 1st. That evidence is 2 distinct blood spatter patterns on the surface of Nancy Guthrie's front porch, close to the door, confirmed as hers. A close-up photograph of the porch surface shows those 2 patterns with forensic clarity. The first is located in the upper center of the image. The second is in the lower right, closer to the edge. Clemente looked at both and began reading them the way an experienced investigator reads a scene, not for what is dramatic or immediately visible, but for what the physical laws of blood in motion actually tell you about the human body that produced it. The larger droplets in the upper center pattern drop almost straight down. There are minimal tails, the directional streaks that form when blood falls from a source that is moving through space. When a source is stationary, when a person is not walking or running but is still, the blood falls vertically and lands in a rounder, more contained circle. That is what Clemente saw. Nancy was not moving when that blood hit the ground. She was down. Her face was within inches of that porch surface when she produced that pattern. Among those droplets, something specific caught his attention. Several appear not as solid spots, but as hollow rings. A ring-shaped blood drop is produced when the droplet carries an air bubble inside it. The bubble survives the fall, and when the drop strikes the ground, it bursts outward, leaving only the outer edge of blood rather than a filled circle. That formation has one primary cause in forensic analysis: Aspiration. Blood that has entered the airway and been expelled under the pressure of a cough or a breath. Nancy had been struck in the face. She had inhaled blood. And she was close enough to the ground that when her body expelled it, it landed in a pattern that a retired FBI profiler could read 90 days later and tell us exactly what it meant. She was on her knees, or collapsed forward with her face inches from the surface, alone, on her own front porch, in the dark. Clemente's reconstruction of how she got there is the part that will stay with you. He believes Nancy complied inside the house. An 84-year-old woman woken from sleep by a masked stranger with a gun has every rational reason to comply. She most likely got out of bed. She went downstairs. She walked with him toward the door. But somewhere between the inside of her home and the outside world, something shifted in her understanding of what was happening. She realized she was not just being confronted, she was being taken. And she decided she would not go. That decision, made in the dark at her own front door by a woman who could not have weighed more than 130 pounds, standing against a masked man with a weapon, is permanently preserved in the blood pattern on that porch. The hollow rings, the vertical drops, the contained, stationary pattern of someone who was down but was there, physically present, physically resistant, physically refusing to disappear without leaving something behind. She left something behind. And this week, Jim Clemente finally told us what it says. But the blood does not just tell us what Nancy did in those final moments. It tells us something specific about the person who took her. Something that changes the profile of this suspect in a way that the public conversation around this case has not yet fully absorbed. Because according to Clemente, the blood on that porch, combined with everything else the physical evidence shows, points to someone who made a series of significant mistakes that night. Mistakes that reveal exactly the kind of person they are. And mistakes that are going to be the reason they are found. The blood on that porch answered the first question. Now it answers the second one. And this second answer has been debated in comment sections, in online forums, and across every platform following this case since the footage was released in February. Was there more than one person in that house? Jim Clemente looked at the same porch photograph that this community has been analyzing for 3 months. He applied the forensic framework of someone who has read thousands of violent crime scenes. And he came back with an answer that is grounded not in opinion, but in the physical logic of what blood does when a human body falls. If 2 or more people had been controlling Nancy Guthrie at that front door, they would not have let her hit the ground. That is the forensic reality. When a person is under the physical control of multiple individuals, there are hands on them. There is coordinated management of their movement. Someone is holding an arm, someone has a grip on a shoulder. They do not drop face first to within inches of a porch surface while multiple trained individuals are present. But that is exactly what the blood pattern shows. Nancy went down, unassisted, uncaught. Her face came within inches of that porch surface, and she stayed there long enough to produce the blood deposit that forensic teams photographed and bagged on the morning of February 1st. A careful look at the lower right section of the porch image shows a single smear pattern moving through the blood deposit. One path. One set of footwear impressions. If multiple people had been standing at that door, moving through that confined space, their shoes would have left overlapping impressions through the blood. Multiple tracks through spatter are one of the most reliable indicators of multiple offenders at a scene. There are not multiple tracks here. Clemente was precise about the limits of what he could conclude. He cannot rule out that someone else was involved elsewhere, someone who provided information in advance, someone connected to the planning who never came to that property. But at the scene itself, based on the physical evidence that exists in the public record, his professional conclusion is clear. One person struck Nancy. One person let her fall. One person picked her up and carried her toward the vehicle. The blood trail that fades as it moves away from the front door toward the end of the walkway tells that final part of the story. After Nancy went down, she was carried toward the street, with her face turned upward. The source of the bleeding was her face. Face up, the blood stayed with her rather than falling forward onto the ground ahead of her. The trail does not continue in concentrated form toward the road because by that point she was being moved in a way that kept the wound facing the sky. One person did all of that. And that same person, according to Clemente, left behind a series of mistakes that a profiler can read as clearly as the blood itself. He said it without qualification. This person was not a sophisticated criminal. This is not something they had done before. Look at what the doorbell camera actually captured in that single frame before the footage went dark. The backpack on the suspect's back has reflective straps on the front harness. Reflective material is designed to be seen in low light. It bounces available light back toward any source illuminating it, including infrared camera sensors. Someone with genuine operational experience conducting a nighttime abduction would never carry equipment with reflective detailing. The straps identified the specific backpack model. The backpack model is sold exclusively at one retailer. That one detail handed investigators a complete purchase database from a single corporate entity. The clothing is lighter in tone than a practiced operative would choose for a nighttime operation built entirely around not being seen. The infrared lens of the doorbell camera picked up that lighter tone clearly, contributing to the detail in the footage that investigators have been analyzing ever since. And then there is the hand. The suspect raises his hand toward the camera in what appears to be an attempt to block the lens or interrupt the footage. A wide-angle doorbell camera does not work that way. Raising a hand toward the lens does not eliminate the recording. It creates a new data point. The wrist area exposed by that gesture. Investigators have reportedly examined that image carefully for identifying features, including what some have described as a possible tattoo. Each of those mistakes tells the same story. This person researched how to do this. They acquired equipment. They studied the property. They built a plan. But the plan was constructed by someone who had never actually executed an operation like this before. And when reality arrived, it exposed every gap between the preparation and the practice. That gap is what Clemente focused on next, because understanding what kind of person makes these specific mistakes in this specific combination points towards something more precise than a general suspect description. It points toward a background, a history, a specific type of relationship with Nancy Guthrie's world that most of the public conversation around this case has not been examining. Clemente does not believe the suspect had a deep or long-standing connection to Nancy. He does not believe this was someone embedded in her family network or her close social circle. He believes the connection was brief, ordinary, and completely unremarkable at the time it occurred. A service interaction, the kind that happens dozens of times a year in the life of an elderly woman living alone in an upscale neighborhood. A photograph of the Catalina foothills street where Nancy lived shows exactly the environment Clemente is describing. Large lots separated by distance and vegetation, long driveways leading to houses set well back from the road. The kind of neighborhood where a service vehicle, a ride-share car, a landscaping truck, a contractor's van belongs without question. Where it parks without drawing a curtain back or prompting a neighbor to write down a plate number. Where it can sit long enough for someone inside it to observe a property, note the patterns of the person who lives there, and leave without a single person remembering they were present. Clemente named the categories specifically. An Uber or Lyft driver who gave Nancy a ride, a repair person who came to the house for a job, a contractor, a lawn care worker, a pool maintenance technician, a delivery driver who came to the door often enough to exchange a few words, someone whose professional role gave them access to Nancy in a setting where conversation is natural, where an elderly woman living alone might mention her daughter, where an attentive observer could learn in a single interaction that this woman was vulnerable, that she lived without anyone else in the house, and that she had a direct connection to a nationally known television personality. That last detail is the one Clemente returned to, because it connects the suspect's background theory to the most specific and most forensically grounded motive theory this investigation has produced. And it is rooted not in speculation, but in a behavioral pattern that Clemente has seen in his casework before. Every kidnapping with a ransom demand that he has worked followed the same communication logic. The demand goes to the family, privately, quietly, because the kidnapper's primary interest is the money, and their primary need is secrecy. The moment media becomes involved, law enforcement follows. Experienced criminals in ransom situations understand that instinctively, and they protect against it. This suspect sent the notes to TMZ, not to Savannah, not to the family through a private channel, to a media outlet with one of the highest traffic audiences in the country, repeatedly, over multiple weeks. Not because they wanted secrecy, because they wanted the opposite. Clemente's reading of that behavioral choice is the most precise motive analysis any credentialed expert has offered in this entire investigation. He believes this person has a fixation on Savannah Guthrie, not on Nancy, on Savannah. A delusional sense of connection to the celebrity daughter that existed entirely in the suspect's mind, that was never acknowledged or reciprocated, and that generated a motivation that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with attention. Taking Nancy was not the goal. Getting Savannah to respond was the goal. And Savannah did respond. She made videos. She spoke directly to whoever was watching. She sent a message back through the media. She gave this person exactly what a forensic behavioral expert says they were looking for. Someone briefly in Nancy's world. Someone she would not remember. Someone who has been watching this investigation develop for 3 months from whatever distance they retreated to after February 1st. And according to Clemente, that person has not been as invisible as they think. Because the behavioral changes that follow a crime like this, the altered appearance, the anxiety, the questions that do not quite fit, the sudden need to be somewhere else, are visible to the people closest to them. A roommate, a coworker, a family member. Someone who noticed that something shifted in this person around the time an 84-year-old woman disappeared from her home in Tucson. That person has not called yet, but Clemente believes they will. And when the behavioral thread and the genetic genealogy investigation converge, this case will close. The only question left is which one gets there first. Toward the end of his interview, Jim Clemente was asked the question that this community has been sitting with for 3 months. The question that gets asked every week when another day passes without an arrest, without a named suspect, without a public confirmation that the investigation has moved somewhere new. Is this a cold case? He did not pause. He did not qualify his answer or soften it for an audience that might be losing hope. He said, "This is far from a cold case." Those 6 words from a man who spent his career building violent crime cases inside the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit carry a weight that a general statement of optimism does not. Clemente knows what a cold case looks like from the inside. He knows the difference between an investigation that has run out of road and one that has gone quiet because it is building toward something it cannot yet announce. He is not saying this to comfort anyone. He is saying it because the forensic genetic genealogy work is active, the leads are being followed, and in his professional assessment, the direction of this investigation is toward identification and not away from it. The public silence is not the same as investigative silence. It never has been. Now here is the part of Clemente's analysis that this community needs to hold on to most carefully, because it is the most specific and most actionable thing any credentialed expert has said about this case in 3 months. And it is directed not just at the investigators and not just at the public. It is directed at a specific person who is watching this coverage right now from somewhere in or connected to Tucson, Arizona. Someone in the suspect's life has already noticed that something changed. Clemente describes the behavioral picture of this person since the doorbell footage was released in February with the precision of someone who has watched this pattern play out across hundreds of violent crime cases. When the images went public, the suspect's stress level reached its peak. What followed, according to Clemente's behavioral model, was a series of changes that the people closest to this person would have seen and registered, even if they did not fully understand what they were seeing. The appearance changed: a haircut, a shaved beard, or a grown one. Something deliberate, designed to create distance between the face in the mirror and the masked figure on a doorbell camera that was suddenly on every news channel in the country. The vehicle may have changed color. There may have been a sudden and unexplained need to travel, to be somewhere else, to put physical distance between this person and Tucson, while the initial wave of coverage was at its highest. Before February 1st, this person may have been talking, not confessing, leaking, mentioning Savannah Guthrie or her mother in conversation in ways that did not quite fit the context, expressing an interest in the case that felt slightly too specific for someone with no connection to it, asking questions after the disappearance became public that revealed a familiarity beyond what a casual observer following the news would have. After February 1st, the talking stopped. What replaced it was watching, monitoring every development, following coverage closely, checking whether the people around them were being approached by investigators, looking for signals that the investigation was getting closer. That shift from the person they were before to the person they became after happened in front of someone: a partner, a friend, a coworker, a sibling, a neighbor who noticed that this person seemed different in a way they could not quite name but could not quite dismiss either. That person has not called yet. Clemente is certain they will, because the genetic genealogy investigation and the behavioral observations of the people in the suspect's life are moving toward each other. One is working through the DNA databases, building family trees, narrowing toward a name. The other is accumulating in the minds of people who know this suspect personally and who are carrying a growing unease they have not yet put a name to. When those two threads converge, the case closes. The question is not whether that convergence happens. The question is which thread gets there first. What Clemente's full analysis this week adds to the picture this channel has been building across 3 months is specific and significant. The blood spatter evidence was in the public record from the earliest days of this investigation. It was mentioned and moved past. This week, for the first time, a forensic behavioral profiler with BAU experience applied the professional framework that evidence deserved and read it the way it was meant to be read. Nancy fought back. That is now a forensic conclusion, not an emotional inference. The hollow ring droplets, the near vertical fall of the larger blood deposits, the single smear pattern, the absence of multiple shoe prints, the trail that fades as it moves toward the street because she was carried face up toward the vehicle. All of it documented, all of it readable, all of it pointing toward a single person who made significant mistakes and who is now living inside the consequences of those mistakes every day. The reflective backpack straps that identified a product sold at one retailer, the lighter clothing on a night operation, the hand raised to a wide-angle camera that exposed more than it concealed. These are not the mistakes of someone experienced in this kind of crime. They are the mistakes of someone who researched preparation but had never practiced it. Someone who thought they were ready and arrived at that front door to discover they were not. And Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, alone in the dark, facing a masked stranger with a gun, found the gap in their preparation at her own front door and walked straight into it. She refused to leave. She fought. She went down and left physical evidence of that fight permanently embedded in the surface of her own porch. Evidence that now sits alongside the DNA the FBI is analyzing, alongside the hair C.C. Moore said can solve this case, alongside the cell tower data the FBI's cellular analysis survey team has been processing, alongside the purchase records Walmart provided in February, each thread incomplete on its own. Together, they are building toward a prosecution. Clemente said it clearly. If a DNA profile has been isolated, investigators will have this person's name, age, and address within weeks, not months, weeks. Now, here is the question we want you to answer in the comments. Clemente believes the suspect had a prior service interaction with Nancy, an Uber driver, a repair person, a contractor, a lawn care worker, someone whose job brought them to her door or her car in a way that seemed completely ordinary at the time. If that theory is right, what type of interaction do you think it was? And if you are someone who provided a service to Nancy Guthrie in the months before February 2026 and noticed something about a colleague or coworker whose behavior changed around that time, that information is exactly what investigators need. One detail from the right person could be the thread that pulls this entire case open. This community has been part of keeping this investigation visible since February 1st. That sustained attention has mattered, and it continues to matter. If you are watching this channel and you are not yet subscribed, now is the moment. Every confirmed development in this case is covered here as it happens. Nancy Guthrie has been missing for more than 3 months. A retired FBI profiler just read the blood on her front porch. This channel will be here the moment the name is finally announced. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit a tip at tips.fbi.gov. You can do so completely anonymously. A reward of up to $1 million is available. If you provided a service to Nancy Guthrie before February 2026, please make that call. What seemed ordinary to you may be the detail that changes everything. This content is for informational purposes only. No individuals are being accused of any crime. All information presented is based on publicly available reports, named on-record sources, and verified reporting. Jim Clemente's statements are quoted directly from his public TMZ interview and attributed to him accordingly. All analytical inferences are explicitly labeled throughout. All persons referenced are presumed innocent unless proven otherwise in a court of law. This channel has no affiliation with the Guthrie family, law enforcement, or any party to this investigation.